would you like to say hello?
Hello, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well today, and I'm so looking forward to this panel discussion today. I know that this is a topic many of us are currently very keen on learning a little bit more about, so absolutely, thank you.
And my name is Kerry Harmer, and I am the Maker Studio Specialist at Mount Royal University. I'm an immigrant from England, and I've lived in many regions across this country, but I am now honored to live and work on the lands of the Niitsitapi and Treaty 7 nations, who include the Blackfoot, the Siksika, the Kainai, the Piikani, and the Tsuut'ina, and the Îyârhe Nakoda nations. This is also the homeland of the Métis people of Region 3. Today, we are really very grateful to have 3 experts to join us today who are going to be helping us to really understand the best ways and some new practices for helping students to access emerging technologies. We have Luciano Santos. He's an assistant professor and faculty development consultant in the Academic Development Center at Mount Royal University. His research and practice focuses on processes for development of post-secondary teaching capacity, including the use of educational technologies. Thanks for joining us, Luciano. We also have Famira Racy with us. She is a co-researcher and coordinator for the Inner Speech Research Lab at Mount Royal University, investigating questions from self-dynamics in students to self-awareness in robots, which I think is pretty cool. She is also an independent scholar, coach, consultant, and mentor with a focus on personal and professional development and wellness. Thanks so much for joining us, Famira. And we also have Nora McLaughlin with us, who is the Dean of Health and Community Studies at Bow Valley College. She has over 20 years of experience as a nurse in various fields of healthcare and 10 years of teaching in the post-secondary environment. Nora believes in excellence in academia through quality, and this is what she and the high-performing team she guides at Bow Valley College all strive towards. As a leader of the School of Health and Wellness and the School of Community Studies, Nora promotes technology with a balance of humanness and works to facilitate collaboration across the college, along with her valued community and global partners. Nora, thanks so much for joining us.
Hi, everyone.
Nora, I wonder, I reached out to you because I read an article on the CBC about some of the work that you've been doing with your students. I wonder if you could just give us a quick overview of that project.
Sure. We wanted to solve a problem in nursing originally, and we reached out to some partners in the industry of virtual reality. And so we've developed an assessment in respiratory and also cardiac and eyes, ears, nose, and throat. And so our nursing students are making their way through those assessments in virtual reality. So with the goggles, and we built a lab that holds 11 stations so that our learners can interact with virtual reality on a larger scale. So we're doing some research on it right now and doing some beta testing on some of our new scenarios, and then we'll be moving on from there into some other areas of the school as well. So moving beyond nursing and into they're looking at they've developed scenarios in hospital unit clerk, and they're looking at others at the moment.
That's super exciting. How do we find out more information about what you're doing? Is there a place that we can go?
You can certainly just reach out to me, and I can, I'll maybe put or you could put my email address even in the chat. I'm happy to answer questions or at least direct questions to the appropriate folks.
That's great. Thanks, Nora. So one of the things I'm really curious about is if students are stressed out about new technology, and if they are, why are they stressed out about new technology, and what are their needs and the preferences for the kinds of technologies that they're interested in engaging in? Famira, you work directly with students. I wonder if you could speak to that question.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I do work with a lot of students in various institutions in Calgary and elsewhere. In my experience, some of the students are stressed out about change overall, whether it's technology or anything else, and maybe resistant to new technology as part of that resistance to change, where others can navigate with ease, or at least they appear or report to navigate with ease. And there are others who are stressed out, but who are not so resistant to the change, who have built support tools, resources around coping with and dealing with change. Of course, these are narrow categorizations. There may be definitely more levels and nuances involved with that. There are definitely shifting demographics that are coming into play. So we see many more mature students in change and transition, changing their career trajectories, changing their areas of studies, changing their lifestyles, their work-life balances. We also have various cultural, developmental, and various backgrounds that actually I've worked with and that we see in schools now online and traditional campuses pre-COVID. So these variables definitely need to be considered. But there are commonalities that I have seen across working with these students. Even those who are familiar with tech are stressed out by several things in common, such as a perceived lack of support or access to support, overwhelming and unclear instructions, lack of confirmation that tech has been used correctly during the process, and unclear expectations about what the end result will or could look like. For example, I pulled a quote from one student, so anything I'm quoting has been done with permission. "I need to know what the tech is for, why I'm using it, and what the implications for my goals are. Will there be a lot at stake if the tech crashes at a critical juncture? How can I be prepared for that? I need to know if there are ways to be successful without always preparing for tech issues, because constant tech issues are like a constant on switch and are anxiety provoking." So
That's for sure. Yeah. Nora, do you see the same kinds of challenges when you're introducing the new technology to students?
We actually are, and Famira gave a very comprehensive look at the stressors, and so I would echo all of those, and then the things that we're seeing right now too is that they also have a perceived or actual lack of confidence with their technical navigation skills as well, and maybe it's related sometimes to a past stressful experience we're finding. And that if they have had issues maybe during an exam or an assessment or during other times that this stays with them. And we're also finding that in many cases, even if the resources, a how-to video or other resources are made available to them, they want to go directly to our academic success department to have their questions answered from someone. They don't want more technology to answer the tech question. So they also don't want to find it in a list of resources or maybe even watch an entire video to get to the truth of the matter. And it's been interesting that while incoming learners may be confident with using their cell phones, often they don't know how to do things on a computer. And I think sometimes we make some assumptions that, we've got a very tech savvy generation or a tech savvy population. And as Famira pointed out as well, the diversity in our groups, not everyone is the same along those lines. And so helping them figure out how to navigate things on the computer or on their cell phone to the same degree or depth, perhaps, that happens on the computer. And when it's related to marks, it's, there's some pretty high stakes.
Yeah, absolutely. Luciano, how do you assist faculty when they come to you with these concerns and these questions about how do I bring everybody up to the same level and the same entry point when everybody is coming into the class with such a variety and a really big disparity of experiences and knowledge around technology?
Thanks, Carrie. And I think there are several strategies faculty members can use to accommodate different students who have, as both panelists mentioned, varying degrees of familiarity with using technology, and especially familiarity in using technology for academic purposes, which is very different from using it for social endeavors or for some other professional nature. So one of the conversations I normally have with faculty members is reminding them of their own intentions, their own pedagogical intentions in adopting a technology. So inviting faculty members to think in terms of what are they expecting their students to learn in their classes, and how is a technology helping those students learn what they want to learn through that technology. So using a technology tool as a facilitator of that learning instead of using it as a flashing new tool just because it's new and might be, maybe some faculty members might have a wrong assumption that a technology might increase engagement on itself through students. Just revisiting those some of those assumptions and helping them really realize how that technology can help those students in that particular learning environment. So that's one of the main aspects of that conversation, is just narrowing down why the technology is there, and then how can instructor point students out to support services, whether they are online support services or in-person places that students can go to and can have those those questions answered. I think there's also some element of that.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that faculty are struggling with finding ways to connect students who are not currently using technology and to encourage them to use technology?
Yes, there's definitely that point. And again, it goes back to, I think, what Famira mentioned in terms of the variety of students. Like the student body is so diverse nowadays. And it's great that we have that diversity, but it's sometimes hard to facilitate learning with very specific tools, especially if we are using just university supported tools that that we have support from the university. Can be quite challenging to navigate that. So one example might be students who might be used to a specific learning management system. Maybe they use that system in their high school years or in other institutions. They come to our university and we have a different set of tools. And some students may have had some struggles in navigating that and that transition. So helping faculty members understand that there are those transitions and how to help our students by pointing them to the right resources. At Montreuil, we have some resources available that students can go to, ITS and information technology systems support that can help students navigate and learn how to use those tools, so that students are no longer focusing on the tool, but they're then learning, focusing on their own learning. So that's one of the strategies we have in talking with faculty members.
Yeah, thanks, Luciano. Nora, at Mount Royal University, with regards to emerging technologies like virtual reality, mixed reality, someone like Luciano, when he's working with a faculty member, could point the faculty member to do some work with Anna, or that those student supports can be facilitated by Anna's team. Do you have a team that helps students who are not currently using those kinds of technologies to encourage them to explore that? Do you have those kinds of facilities at Bow Valley as well?
Yes, we have Academic Success Center, and they've had VR on their radar for quite a long time, and other technologies as well. And so one of the things that we did initially when we started even thinking about VR was I developed a community of practice around the college, and it moved from 4 people to close to 100 people. that just wanted to explore and play with the equipment and learn more from each other. And so that was sort of on the faculty level and other areas in the college. And so that was really important to setting the foundation for supporting the learners. And I know that technology changes so quickly that oftentimes our faculty are learning alongside of our learners. And I think that's an important piece for both faculty and learners to be able to meld into their world. You know, we're used to the sage on the stage and your faculty member knows everything. And I think there's a bit of a shift, a paradigm shift that we need, that we actually are learning these things together, and that's an important part of the way that we're all learning. And I think really connecting with students who aren't currently using tech or to its fullest extent, that clear communication of the functional relevance of the tech to their studies, I think is very important. And then that way they can learn to appreciate perhaps the importance or benefits of that tech, and then how that tech can facilitate them to be successful. I think when they know that it's a requirement, that can make a difference as well. Informing them early of the resources that are available, like our Academic Success Center, I think early in the game, but also remembering that they'll scaffold this learning, and they'll scaffold, and we can scaffold for them the amount of information or the type of information that they might need around the technology for various points in their program. So as they move through the program, for example, we would want to talk about different things, and perhaps in a different way when it comes to a first-year learner just walking in the doors versus a second-year learner, and how can we help them build that foundation through building blocks that help support them in the end to be able to use that technology.
Yeah, that's great. That's great that you have those supports and that scaffolding process moving through, that students can then really explore and build on the capacities that they've already built, which is great. Yeah. Famira, when you're working with students directly, how do you connect students with technology that when they enter into your space or they're doing work with you, if they haven't entered into it already?
Well, for people who are not already using tech, I appeal to a lot of modeling. I personalize. I remember the times when I was not using tech. I remember what it feels like to be the end user. I remember, I backtrack my assumptions. I try to remember what is it that I'm just assuming that the end user, the stakeholder, the person knows, what they don't know, where they're coming from, what their needs are, what their preferences are. So I do a lot of modeling. I ask a lot of questions. I use analogies by probing the person, by asking, questions around what is personally meaningful, relevant in terms of helping them learn. And then what types of analogies can I use that can embed their real world experience or their worldviews into the conceptual knowledge that we're trying to scaffold. So I start at that basic scaffolding level, as Nora mentioned earlier.
Yeah. I think you raise a really great point there, is that asking all of those questions to really establish at what level of us is the student at when they're entering in there, to really understand, rather than making assumptions that we're working with, some digitally literate, because we're making those assumptions that that's where they're entering, when that's not always the case. Who are students talking to learn about technologies, and what are their main questions? I think, Nora, when you've got students going to the Student Academic Success Center, is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a sense of the kinds of questions that they're asking? Are they the questions that we assume they're asking about entering into using new technologies and emerging technologies, or are there different questions that perhaps as a group we could share with each other?
I think for the most part, they're questions that are very specific to the type of technology that they need to use as far as maybe writing a paper or moving through some of the VR 3D printing in our School of Technology, things like that, that they need very specific information around. Finding that's probably the majority. And then secondary to that, probably access to software, passwords that our IT department would then help them with as well. And then, coaching them along the lines of, even when you start to think about a problem that you might have or a lack of information you might have, giving them those go-to resources that, it's taken me a while to think about, okay, a YouTube video could help me with this. And it's helping them really think about the resources in terms of how quickly can I access this. And instructors are probably their first point of contact. And then they kind of move from there as the instructors help them figure out what their resources are. So I think for the most part, it's really, again, to Famira's point about find out where they are at, find out what they need, and then you're able to really pinpoint for them what they're looking for. Sometimes they don't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed that Bruce raised a hand. Bruce, did you have a question?
Yes, as an older student, I find that...
Bruce, we can't quite hear you. You're really quiet.
Hello?
We can hear you a little bit. You might have to yell.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, as an older student, I get concerned when my computer goes blank, and then, like, what the hell do I do? And you can't contact the Athabasca tech department because it's far away, and how do I call them? My computer goes dead. That's my kind of situation a lot of times.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Bruce. I think that really does speak to that, what you were saying, Nora, about students really wanting a person. And I know in our spaces too, we do find that students, they we can provide them with lots of digital resources, but students still do want a person to talk to. Luciano, do you see that with the work that you're doing in the Academic Development Center?
Absolutely, especially with faculty members. There's also the same need for that human interaction. And we do have in the ADC, Academic Development Center, we have a group called Sandbox, and they do provide that one-on-one support to faculty members. And that's crucial to their success, because as important as it is for students to know how to use the technology, faculty members also need to have a good understanding of how the technology is supporting their teaching and how can they use that to facilitate the development of knowledge by their students. So working at the elbow with those faculty members is crucial. Even before joining Mount Royal, I was also part of a support system for faculty members, doing that at the elbow support, and that was paramount to their success, because then they could overcome the anxiety that technology sometimes brings to the conversation. Sometimes you have just a quick question, or even someone to tell you, yes, that's exactly what you have to do. You have to click here, here, and there to know to complete this process. So having someone to provide you that positive reinforcement is also key.
Yeah. And I think it's really nice that you're supporting faculty and kind of emphasizing the importance that faculty understand the technology, that they're having expectations that the students are going to use. So a student like Bruce doesn't necessarily have to go elsewhere to meet IT services. Instead, that first point of contact that they already have, which is a person, is the faculty member. And so, making sure that the faculty can support the students is absolutely makes perfect sense. Famira, what kinds of questions are you getting when you're working with students?
I am getting, what do I need in order to complete the project? I am getting, what are some of the technical difficulties that I can expect? I am getting, a lot of problems around instructional design. So how much of this instructional design these instructions do I actually need to do with actionable deliverables, or how much of it is like conceptual and is just trying to hint me towards the background that I need in order to complete these tasks. Yeah, lots of questions around clarity, structure, consequences, as it has been mentioned several times. What are the consequences if I mess this up? Especially when there's impact involved, like an authority figure or a professor or just somebody who witnesses a blunder. The students are very concerned about how that might actually impact their careers. So it's the type of stuff I'm getting.
Yeah. What kinds of techniques are we seeing work to ease the students' transitions into new learning environments? Nora, you've obviously done that in the courses that you've been working with, where the students have had to kind of move into using a brand new emerging technology in a field that is obviously, not typical. It's not a media arts class where students are, enter into the course and expect that they might be using virtual reality. I wonder if there's any techniques that you've been using in your teaching that really ease that transition for your students into exploring those emerging technologies.
Well, it was interesting that, when we started down this path, it was fairly quick. And so unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of easing into the transition, but, we had a lot of learners who were just ready to explore it and put on the headset and go for it. And I think part of that was that we didn't have marks attached to it. It was merely, this is step one, just, put on the headset and go for it. And it, once they're immersed in it, particularly with VR, once they're immersed in it, they're in a whole other plane. And it's a very interesting and fun place to be. And so when they're inside the environment, they like it. And we worked very hard with our industry partner to make sure that we didn't have things like motion sickness. And so there's a way of transporting, for example, in the nursing, from one side of the bed to the other side of the bed without moving in a way that gives you that motion sickness. So I think it really is, explain to them as part of your technique how this applies to the course that they're in, how it applies to their career once they leave, and then opportunities that it might present as well in our learning environment. And I think really to have transparency on issues, the reason that we use technology is so that we can solve some problems. And I think to be transparent on the issues or the problems and reasons that we brought technology on to begin with, I think is really important. And an early demonstration of really how does this solve the problem and help them move from A to B, and then clear and ongoing communication as well of responsibilities for both faculty and learners. And again, I heard the word structure, consistency, really important transition type activities. When we moved to delivering nursing labs online, that was a huge shift. I mean, it was one thing to move a theory course online and learn MS Teams or learn whatever system you're in, but to actually have to teach learners how to upload videos. First of all, they're using their kitchen tables for a sterile environment, setting up their sterile tray and doing dressing changes on the kitchen table, and then to upload those videos and then to forward those videos to the instructor for grading. Huge changes, and just telling them we're right here with you, like we're right by your side, and if you need us, here we are. And Bruce made a really good point that learning doesn't stop when the classroom is finished, and learning doesn't even stop at 5 p.m. when many jobs stop. You're working on these things at midnight sometimes, and you need help. And so, that just really brought to my attention, thank you, Bruce, that we really need to think about the hours that we provide services for folks, and really just think outside the box, I think, quite a bit on that as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're speaking to so many new innovations in the way that we are teaching and facilitating the learning in higher education, especially in this online setting. Yeah, I'm really curious about one thing you said at the beginning, though, was that you allowed the students just to play, and that it wasn't tied to grades. And so kind of thinking about that piece around allowing students to transition into a new and emerging technology without those things that are the stresses, those things that it's kind of like, well, I have to do this and I have to do it right. Whereas there's kind of an ease into that if you remove the grades and that pressure. Luciana, I wonder if you're using that as a technique when you're working with faculty at Mount Royal.
Absolutely. We always talk about, and yeah, actually yesterday we had a session on active learning, which is, it can be considered one a technique that we can also use technology. And that's one of the things we talk about, is introducing that with low stakes activities that, as Famira mentioned beforehand, diminishes the stressors that students might have when faced with technology, especially technology that is not widespread. I think here we have to also make some distinctions between technology that can be widespread, such as word processing, even video, which sometimes it can be applied in many different settings, to technologies that are very niche and specific to disciplines or to situations, as Nora mentioned in the simulations that you use in your with your nursing program. These different types of technologies can have different types of stressors, and so helping faculty members understand how these technology, introduction of those technologies can impact students, and that can be done in very different ways. One of them is having faculty members actually use the technology as they were students, so they understand the processes and the steps that students have to go through. And we had some interesting examples of that. A couple of years ago, we were running some sessions on helping faculty members create videos for their classes, but also to foster students creating their own video assignments. And we did that by inviting faculty members to create their own videos. So all the processes involved in creating a video, from downloading software to using editing software to connecting a camera to a computer, and all those steps. And along the way, some faculty members had some aha moments, like, oh, this takes longer than I was expecting, or that was budgeting to. And because that was not originally designed in their own processes, that would higher the level of stress and anxiety among students. So engaging into that process and becoming the student themselves can be one of the strategies we use to facilitate that conversation.
Yeah, that's great. It's very much a user-centered approach to creating these new courses. And I'm hearing empathy as a piece. Like, we have to empathize with the learners. And I think Famira brought that up earlier too, is really empathizing with the user and understanding how stressful it might be for them to enter into that. Famira, I saw you nodding as Nora and Luciana were talking. I wonder what you'd like to add to that.
Oh, just understanding the process from the end user or the student's perspective is just so important. There are many things that, as instructors or facilitators or coaches or consultants, that we assume are known, and we assume that we know how long it's going to take and what's going to happen. I just really resonate with breaking down the process, experiencing it the way the students are going to experience it. And also the learning together piece is extremely effective. I've found that as you learn together, you show, as Nora was talking about earlier, just humanizing the process, because We're all learning. The rate of transition is fast. And if we can humanize it and show that we are on the same kind of path, then it takes away some of those barriers around like expectations and impression management and things like that. So.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that. Do you see kind of peer-to-peer mentorship happening between students who are working in your space? Are they helping each other? And do you see that as a successful technique in the space that you work in?
Yes, peer-to-peer mentorship is fantastic. I've seen it in the classrooms and outside of the classrooms. When a course is very tech heavy, I actually do see a lot of outside of the classroom collaboration just to try to get it done. There's a lot of self-study, there's a lot of group study. But in the classroom and in other scenarios and organizations, what I've seen the most effective so far has just been those practical applications. Break it down, as you were talking about, chunking out the work, not grading it, and chunking it out as well. So instead of having like a large deliverable due at the end, you just chunk it out and you get the students to break out into groups together. And what they do is they actually practice the steps and they model it for each other. And they can get together outside of class to continue that type of work. So
that's great, Famira. Thank you. Lucy, do you see faculty trying to build that kind of thing into their curriculum where they're kind of allowing in the coursework students to work peer-to-peer and learn from each other?
Absolutely, that collaborative learning is key, and we see that in the literature as well. It's quite effective way of enhancing learning, embedding that peer instruction into our curriculum. And one of the strategies I personally use in my own classes with students is to map out the kind of expertises and skills students bring to the table, so that they can share that and create a repository of support that can initiate that conversation. It can be quite hard for students, for instance, if they're struggling in editing a video for a video assignment, if they don't know who to ask to among their peers. So by having that wall of awesome that we used to call, where students place, okay, this is what I'm good at, and I can help, I'm willing to help others with, that can help. And also, by doing that, we also create a sense of community, especially in an online environment that is so lacking. So it fosters that development as well.
I love the wall of awesome. Is that what you call it? The wall of awesome? Yeah, I love that. Carmelita has a question for Luciano. It's just in the chat there. Can you see it, Luciano? Or would you like me to read it? Okay.
So I think in the recording it's not stated, so I can just read the question. So mentioning collaborative learning, what are the ways we could recommend to facilitate learning? So there are several different strategies we can use to embed that collaborative learning into our classes. Again, it really depends on our learning objectives and what we want to achieve through that collaboration, especially if, depending on the level of course, whether it is a first-year course versus a capstone fourth-year course in a university setting. But regardless of that, there are different ways in which we can embed that collaboration, from informal bundle up and share a conversation, doing a think, pair, share strategy, all the way to create a team-based learning course that is all structured around a collaboration. It really depends on what we want to achieve in terms of educational goals. And from there on, starting to find strategies that can better help that collaboration and that initiation of that conversation. And one other thing I wanted to highlight is also being transparent. And Nora mentioned that in all this conversation, being transparent is key. So sharing to our students why we are using technology or why we are using a group project in this situation. What are the rationales that we have in order to do that? Sorry, Carmelita, which part did you? Oh, in terms of intentionality. So sharing that rationale to our participants so that they really understand why we are making them do it. Because some students have that perception that as faculty members, we are making them do work, which is not the case. So being able to be explicit about why we are designing learning activities that can better help their learning, whether it is through using technology, through using different teaching techniques. That's one of the pieces.
Thank you. Nora, the peer-to-peer and the Wall of Awesome works really well with technologies that students have had experiences with. But that's a little bit more challenging if you're using something like virtual reality, where probably most of the students have not had any experience with it. In the coursework that you've created, where you are embedding virtual reality into that, have you been able to facilitate some peer-to-peer learning or supports around that at this point?
Well, I think lucky for us, there are a few folks out there that do gaming and have used the virtual reality and
Right.
even out there in the community, we've got the virtual reality places to have some fun. And so we do have a few peers who have been able to help the other peers. I really appreciate, I love that team-based learning course, Luciano, because I think that would set the stage for so much in this particular type of learning versus a group project, to have an entire course team-based. So might just borrow that idea. Thank you. And I'm sure there are some who do it. I'm just not aware of all. But I think what's really important too, whether you're learning a brand new or whether you have experience with tech, but being aware of the diversity in your classroom around tech. So peer-to-peer, I think it's important that we realize that people have diversity in technology knowledge, and that we ensure that there's inclusion. And I think sometimes, there might be an element of, judgment, perhaps, if somebody isn't as tech savvy and needs a little bit more help. And I think sometimes that's where we need that empathy to kick in a big way, I think, to help with supporting that peer-to-peer learning. And really, we try and start that peer-to-peer learning right from orientation day. So a few days before they walk into the classroom, even they're in orientation with one another. And it's really important that they meet in the online chat there. They form groups so that they develop support systems right at the very beginning. And then we also have, through our Learner Success Services, peer tutoring. And it's a formal setup of, those who volunteer to be peer tutors and then those who volunteer to be tutored. And that's a really, really important part of the learning journey as well. And then informally, of course, through MS Teams, we've started conversations now, and they're really starting to pick up on within the online learning environment. And then, of course, there's Facebook groups. And I think it really provides an academic, a social, and an emotional support for the learners, because sometimes not knowing about technology or feeling silly about it can make you feel isolated. And so I think having that place to go and seeing that someone else is doing it successfully makes it feel doable for you too. Mm-hmm. And so I think building those communities and early networking amongst the learners is really integral to their success.
Yeah. That's great. We have peer-to-peer learning as well, and tutoring on campus at Mount Royal as well. I'm just wondering if just kind of like our last question here before we open up to our whole group here. Nora, could you summarize, do you think, for us, how your institution is incorporating emerging technology in general across the campus? And how you've mentioned a few areas that are helping students to ease those transitions to emerging technology. But I wonder if you could just speak in general about the emerging technology that's being incorporated in general at Bow Valley.
I think, particularly over the past year during the pandemic, technology has surfaced as something that we can no longer say we're going to get to it or that will happen soon. It's here, and I think just embracing it as a culture within the college, having our ITS department front and center like they've never been before. IT was a place you'd make a phone call to, but now our IT folks are, leading the strategy in some cases. Having technology available is something that we're focusing on now, and integrated into the classes that then, of course, sparks the student interest, and learners are discovering, generally speaking, what amazing things they can do through technology on their own and with groups. I mean, in health, of course, we've used the VR. In Choose School of Business, we're starting to use VR. We have empathy experiences in health and wellness and community studies around disease processes like dementia, where they're actually able to experience what it's like. And I think, what that does is kind of bridge the gap from learner to professional, and really helps them, know that they will be working with people with disease processes or with issues and areas of development that are needed. And so I think, generally speaking, our institution is really working with technology from all angles to really start to develop that overall sense of we're going to get through this and we're going to be good at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Luciano, I wonder if you could speak in general about how Mount Royal University is incorporating emerging technology into kind of our culture.
I think part of that, as Nora mentioned, it's with the pandemic, it becomes inevitable not to talk about technology and how that impacts learning. And one of the places where I can see that happening right now at Mount Royal is engaging multiple stakeholders in conversations around adding a new learning management system. So having that platform where different stakeholders, whether it is ITS, faculty members, students, administration, come together and have that conversation and bring their own expertise to the table, but also their own concerns, and through that, having that possible solutions that can impact all campus. Another thing that happens at Mount Royal is through the Academic Development Center, promoting that conversation among faculty members in how to incorporate and how to integrate that technology into their own teaching, engaging faculty members in reflecting on ways in which they can either augment their teaching with technology or even transform their teaching through the use of different learning technologies. So there are different ways in which you can see Mount Royal moving to adding more innovative technology to their own teaching and learning processes.
Mm-hmm. That's great, thank you. Obviously, in the library at Mount Royal University, we have a number of different tools and technologies that students can access, and by being in the library, there's a beauty of it being really democratic in terms of its availability. So I think that's another thing that we're doing quite nicely at Mount Royal as well. Mira, I wonder if you have some thoughts as you're speaking to students and just kind of reflecting on how institutions are incorporating emerging technology and easing those tech transitions for students, just as some final words.
Well, in my own experience, Adler University is a really good case for this, because their the whole paradigm is around a culture of innovation, change, transition, understanding the value of the person for the self and the society. So like it's all embedded in the culture, the organizational culture itself, and then incorporated into various levels of strategic planning and implementation. And then, as you mentioned earlier, just stakeholder engagement, stakeholder involvement has been really, really huge in terms of formulating those strategic action plans and getting the insights and making them happen, and riding those waves of change. So that's what I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Vamira. I'd like to open the conversation up just in our last 10 minutes here. We have a question from Audrey. Audrey, would you like me to read the question? Would you rather just turn your microphone on?
Sure, I can read the question. The question that I had is, so we all kind of engage with technology and it changes and it's frustrating and things are always updated, and that's part of the interest in having software updated is it's more secure. But I'm wondering, like, taking the technology and kind of putting it aside and thinking about what students are getting as these life skills. Like, are you guys looking at it as sort of like there are deliverables to a learning outcome, for instance, that you've identified that help students with potentially like this approach to being courageous to trying new things, or that the fear no longer exists and it's really about just immersing themselves in trying to sort of figure it out, like from curiosity instead of a fear-based approach to learning something new, like a new technology? Maybe.
So I can I would like to take a crack at that one, if I may. I think that Audrey, your question is fantastic, and I'm just moving through my head around learning outcomes and the deliverables and that approach to being courageous. And I'm going to take that to our curriculum committee to actually talk about those. And I know we talk about a lot right now about soft skills and being able to have empathy and be able to communicate, but I think that ability to adapt is a really important sort of life skill that I think needs to be supported and promoted and help people sort of move toward that growth mindset so that they're open to change, so that they're open to thinking about things initially and then developing and working on self in that personal adaptability realm. And how do we work through frustrations? And how do we work through that, again, approach to being courageous? So one of the hypotheses, we're doing some research around our VR right now, and one of the hypotheses is around confidence that it comes with. So we're not looking at the tech itself, we're looking at the learner experience and the confidence level that it brings with that. So stay tuned. We'll have some more information on that kind of thing. It's a great question. Thank you.
We look forward to hearing the outcomes of that. That's great. Carmelita, you've got your hand up. Would you have a question? Feel free to turn your mic on.
Hello.
We can hear you. Might need to speak up a little bit.
Okay, so my question is, have you ever encountered students who is not learning at all or having a difficulty of learning, and how did you handle that? It's very difficult if the student's not learning at all, and how did you handle that situation?
That's a great question. Did the panelists hear the question clearly?
Yep. I could probably take a stab at this one. We're never too sure what a learner is learning or how they're learning it until we really connect with them to figure that out. Oftentimes I see motivation has a lot to do with it. We've brought up the point of transparency. This transparency translates to motivation, because what's happening is a student becomes a vested learner in their own learning, and they can start to pinpoint where the matches and the dissonances between the motivations behind the instructional design, the learning, and the technology, how those line up. So just working with the student to figure out what's their motivations, what are the things that cue them in, what are the things that turn them off, and really just engaging with them so that they're at the center of their learning usually catapults a bit of motivation there.
Mm-hmm. And Nora and Luciana, would you like to add to that?
I can continue that, because a point that is tangential to that is also inviting students to take more ownership of their own learning. And it ties back to Famira's point around motivation, is especially for post-secondary education, students are here for a reason. So trying to have students articulating those reasons and then tying those reasons to the purposes of their own learning experiences. That's why the transparency piece is so key. Because that's how instructors can foster that motivation, can foster that connection to inviting students to then identify areas that they need for support, and then guiding them through accessing those points of support that they need.
That's great. Thanks, Luciana.
If I may, I think it is an interesting conversation around, that ownership of learning. And I think sometimes our students feel like they should have a handle on everything in their learning environment. And they might be working a job for X number of hours a week. They might have children. They might have all of the above, and feel that expectation to make sure that everything is running smoothly. But to Luciano's point, there are so many different supports in post-secondary now that are not related to the learning at all. They might be related to finances. They might be related to child support. They're related to all aspects of life. And so hopefully that encourages students to look at their learning on a spectrum, and to really then, how do I make this part of who I am and how I can be successful? And sometimes there is a give and take. Sometimes we have to, have less hours in our job, but it's all about that having a look at what that learning is for a particular person. And then when technology can help it, or a growth mindset can help sort of move you through the changes or make you more motivated, or help you be more motivated, I think is really related to that whole thing. And, the question also begs another question around how do instructors know, like, how do they figure these things out? And I think, there's not signs on everyone's now virtual learning space, but I think it's that engagement that needs to happen on a level that digs a little bit deeper than, are you having trouble with the assignment, or do you understand what this assignment means? I think it's touching base on a few of the deeper questions.
I love that, Nora, that kind of speaking to and understanding the whole student in order to support their learning. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Joanna, you have a question.
No, I don't believe I do.
Oh, your hand was up.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay, no problem. We've just got 1 minute left. I wonder if there are any other last questions. Well, I actually really love the thought of ending on thinking about our students as whole, and that holistic approach to thinking about them as whole human beings, so that we can support the learning part of their lives. I love that as a place for us to end our conversation today. Thank you all so very much. Thank you, Nora, for joining us. Thank you, Luciano, and thank you, Famira. This has been a really great session, and we've really enjoyed it. And I hope that everybody here today in the room with us has got some takeaways to take back, so that we can support our students in engaging with emerging technologies further. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Stay tuned for March the 17th is Perspectives on Esports, and April 21st is Tech for Good.
Excellent. Thank you for the invitation. It's been